is Seth Harris. I am a teacher at Shaker Junior High School in Latham, and I will be the chief judge for this competition.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Patel. I'm a third year law student in Albany Law.
And good morning also. My name is Nicholas Lokma, also a third year at Albany Law.
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Kimberly Hanson. I'm here with my teammates, Tyler Hammond and Sean Lasher. We are going to judge them.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And I believe we are here to cover Unit 1 of We the People. Is that correct? Thank you. Just before we get started, just to let you know, there are emergency exits to your right and left. And when the alarm goes off, try and use those. Anyway, without further ado, we will get right into the questions for Unit 1, and please follow the instructions that our timer gave you at the very beginning. The first question that we have: what are the major differences between classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy? How might those differences affect thinking about the purposes and goals of government? And what might the consequences be for individuals in society of placing too great an emphasis on the common good over the right of individuals, emphasizing the rights of individuals over the common good?
Natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism form the two competing interests that the framers of the Constitution struggled to balance. They represent two different views of the social contract espoused by a notable enlightenment. They represent two very different views of the social contract espoused by the notable Enlightenment writers, particularly Rousseau. Classical republicanism emphasizes civic virtue and stresses the needs of the state over the needs of the individual, while natural rights philosophy focuses more on individual liberty, with limited government interference beyond what is necessary to the preservation of the liberties. Our founding fathers sought to create an acceptable balance between the two forces. They had experienced the dangers of letting the state hold too much power. In fact, they had fought a war to escape the influence from a tyrannical British power. However, the ultimate failures of the Articles of Confederation had taught them the dangers of allowing too much individual freedom at the expense of civic virtue, or rather placing greater emphasis on natural rights over classical republicanism. Many aspects of our government can be traced back to this great balancing act. In particular, the Bill of Rights was added to expand the natural and inalienable rights of the citizens.
Classical republicanism and natural rights philosophy differ in the degree that they infringe upon an individual's liberties. In classical republicanism, the government calls on the individual to completely dedicate himself to the betterment of the state as a whole, even at the expense of his own liberties. One can look to the case of Cincinnatus being appointed to lead Rome on 3 separate instances, only to subsequently forfeit that power and return to his humble life as a farmer. This exemplifies the role of a citizen under a classical republican form of government. Currently, the right of habeas corpus can be suspended during wartime, a definitive example of how the interest of the state can come before those of individuals. On the other side of the scale lies natural rights philosophy, which places a greater emphasis on the preservation of individual liberties. The allowance for conscientious objectors is an example of the triumph of individual liberties over the interests of the state as a whole.
The consequences of placing too great an emphasis on the common good over the rights of individuals, or of emphasizing the rights of individuals over the common good, are often nebulous, but nevertheless are scrutinized and tested daily in the Oval Office, Congress, and the Supreme Court. Measures that enforce obedience to the common good at their most extreme can be totalitarian in nature and insidiously erode the rights of individuals. It is that tyranny of the masses that de Tocqueville wrote about in 1831 that silences the voices of the minority. In the Supreme Court case, Korematsu v. United States, the Supreme Court ruled that Executive Order 9066, which ordered Japanese Americans into internment camps during World War II, was constitutional. This is a clear example of when the rights of individuals are eroded for the promotion of the common good. On the other hand, however, emphasizing the rights of individuals over the common good can lead to public unrest. In Johnson v. Texas, the Supreme Court of the United States invalidated prohibitions regarding the desecration of the American flag. The next year, however, Congress tried to amend the Constitution to allow the federal government and the states to prohibit flag burning. In 1989, the Flag Protection Act was passed but struck down by the Supreme Court in the case United States v. Eaton. The fact that this act, counter to the Supreme Court's decision, quickly passed in Congress exemplifies how the opinion of the majority can be overlooked, causing public unrest. Thank you, Your Honors. We're now ready to take your questions.
So, you cited different examples of where rights people were paramount to rights of the individual. Can you cite any contemporary examples where the individual's rights predominated over the good, and conversely where the good dominated over individual rights? Any contemporary examples?
With the fairly recent passage of the Patriot Act, one can see that as a definitive example of national security becoming in the interest of the state as a whole and protecting individuals as taking precedent over individual rights, as certain liberties were withheld to ensure the protection of the state as a whole.
We also see an example of both the interests of the state and the interests of the individual in the idea of a national draft. A national draft does infringe upon individual liberties for the good of the state, as it basically conscripts a large amount of the population to fight in a war they may or may not believe. However, the conscientious objector shows some of the influence of those natural rights in that they are exempt from this draft. In a strictly classical republican system, there would be no conscientious objector because civic virtue or obedience to the interest of the state is the highest value.
What responsibility, if any, do you think schools have for teaching and encouraging civic virtue in life?
Schools are responsible for cultivating moral and civic knowledge and education in students as they progress through their teen years. This can be seen in New York State, where every student is, or has a graduation requirement, required to participate in a participation in government class, where they are involved in attending maybe a town meeting or learning other ways how they can participate in government. So the role of the educational system plays an important part in ensuring that students, upon reaching the age of 18 and the age where they can vote, are fully aware of their responsibilities and their rights and how they can participate in government.
If you were asked to create a government that reflects principles of both classical republicanism and the natural rights philosophy, which elements of each would you pick and why?
Well, the ideas of teaching civic virtue in schools, as my colleague pointed out, would have to be paramount in any such system. Because if you're going to give people these individual liberties, they have the capability to abuse them to the detriment of the state. You must make sure they have some form of moral education, as Plato relied upon in building his perfect state in the Republic. However, we can't argue that the state can also become abusive to individual liberties. That is why we need some protections, such as the Bill of Rights. I would argue that first among these, and the first that should be included in any state we were to create with these parameters, would be freedom of speech and freedom of the press, because these are the options through which almost all of our other rights are exercised.
I would like to emphasize on what my colleague was saying. Another right that needs to be added is the Ninth Amendment. That needs to be emphasized because that also protects the unenumerated rights that aren't included in the Constitution. Therefore, the government cannot take those rights away that are not included.
Are there any other specifics that are in our current form of government that you would like to see in the government that you would create, upholding these values?
Personally, every individual is going to have their own idea of what natural rights are. If you are asking, as I believe, what we would add to any such system, personally, I would add the right to marry very controversial right now, as in the idea that any individual may marry any other individual they would like.
Okay, so we've discussed a lot of different philosophies of government. Of the two competing philosophies that you guys seem to have identified pretty well as dichotomy, which philosophies do you think are the most conducive to a limited form of government? Would it be one where the individual rights are paramount, or one where
I believe that without a doubt you have to look to a society where individual rights are emphasized almost entirely over the rights of the state. Natural rights philosophy, almost in definition, implies a limited government by ensuring that all the rights, inalienable rights that people are entitled to are protected and are protected by the government while at the same time not being infringed upon by the government.
However, we must keep in mind that the people have a right to protection, to live safely. Therefore, we cannot ignore entirely the role of government in protecting those same rights it grants. This essential attempt to strike a balance is at the core of our democracy.
maybe a follow-up question? Can you envision, imagine a government where you have this need for civic duty, where the rights of the whole seem to outweigh the rights of the few? Could you imagine a government like that is still limited, in your opinions?
I don't believe that a government that puts the rights of itself over the rights of the individuals would still be successful in a way, because it takes away the complete rights of the citizens, and it is not a democracy because the citizens, a limited government takes away the rights of the citizens. I see that our time's concluded. May I briefly conclude my point? It cannot play a role in limited government because limited government does not have as much of a hands-on approach, and it takes away more rights of the citizen if it was to be more of the rights of the state.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a couple of words of feedback before we release you from your seats. I thought that you guys did a tremendous job. You brought in some really good points of view, some excellent examples from history, Supreme Court decisions, as well as different historical events and figures. And I specifically liked your answer to a follow-up question, Tyler, on the items that you would put into a government that you would create. That's what I was looking for. Obviously, the key word in that was if you were asked to create it, not the founding fathers. And I specifically like that it took into account a recent issue that can sort of be a crisis, both because it wasn't in the Constitution and because of the 10th Amendment. So I really appreciate you putting in your 2 cents on that. Colleagues?
Everything that he said, I agree with. In addition, I thought you guys were very responsive, good eye contact with me. When a question was asked, I felt as if you really responded to the question. In addition, I thought that your reasoning and the way you went about it showed that you really grasped the material, and the material wasn't something that you couldn't wrestle with. Even when I asked you some questions that asked you to think outside of maybe prepared material, you seemed as if you were able to draw back on experiences and other knowledge to give very good, concise answers. Good job.
We thought you guys did a really good job on the presentation. Also, I agree with my colleagues. I thought you did well with the providing supporting evidence on the cases, and the lawsuit as well as the world's like to hear cases. So that was really very responsible.
Thank you for all of your hard work and research, which it's obvious that you've done, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.